latest updates there. We've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa dispatch special envoys Sydney Mufamadi and Baleka Mbete to Harare, Zimbabwe's capital on the 10th of August to explore ways in which South Africa can help its neighbor. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa rebuffed the South African attempt to help deal with the nation's economic and political crisis and downplay the problems the country faces despite a series of protests in the country challenging alleged human rights abuses. In fact, there's also been a fresh bid for bail by journalist Hopewell Chin'ono, which took place on Thursday before the magistrate. Of course, following previous failed attempts, the award-winning journalist was arrested at his home on the 20th of July. It's the same day as the opposition leader and convener of the planned 31st of July nationwide protest against corruption, Jacob Ngarivume. Ngarivume and Chin'ono have individually been denied bail after 3 weeks in detention. But to unpack the latest in that regard, Doug Coltart, lawyer and activist, now joins us for the update. Doug, a very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining. I think just before we get to the case, the bail application of Jacob as well as Hopewell, let's just look at the current state of Zimbabwe to date. I mean, putting your activist hat on, what is the situation on the ground like in Zimbabwe as we speak? We've heard of protests, we've heard of, strong opposition, but from your perspective, paint that picture for us, please.
Yeah, the situation is very bad. It's very concerning. On an economic level, things are totally unraveling. We have over 700% inflation. People are not earning enough to get by, to survive, including civil servants earning less than $40 US dollars a month. On a human rights side of things, are really unraveling in a very worrying way as well. We're seeing the police involved in all sorts of, both the police and the military involved in all sorts of serious human rights violations. Most worrying of all is the spate of abductions, often by unknown people, potentially military, potentially civilians who engage in torture and then hand people over to the police. The police then accepting tortured persons into their custody. And there was an incident this week of when one of the victims of abduction, his wife, went to make a police report about the abduction of her husband. And then she was then arrested and charged with making a false report. This follows the same pattern with what we've seen with the 3 MDC ladies, Joanna, Cecilia, and Netsai, who were also charged with faking their abduction after they had been abducted and brutally tortured and sexually assaulted. So these types of human rights abuses seem to be on the rise, and no one is spared, whether you are an opposition politician, a journalist, or a lawyer. Of course, this week we had police outside our offices at Mtetwa and Nyambirai, the law firm that is representing Hopewell Chin'ono. Police officers outside chanting, singing songs, war songs outside our police, outside our law offices. So it really seems to be sliding into a very dangerous place, and it seems like Mr. Mnangagwa is completely unhinged.
So Doug, on that note, I mean, you've spoken about the human rights atrocities, the abductions, you've spoken about the dire economic situation, the high inflation rate, in fact, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm looking at the South African envoy that, of course, was sent by our President Cyril Ramaphosa on Monday, obviously being rebuffed by President Emmerson Mnangagwa. I mean, ultimately, from a Zimbabwean standpoint, the average Zimbabwean, what was the perception of that visit? And what do you think it has done between relations between the two countries as we speak?
Yeah, I think the envoy, when it was announced, was met with some sort of cautious optimism in Zimbabwe among the citizenry. Zimbabweans have of course been burnt in the past by South Africa playing somewhat of an unhelpful role in propping up the ZANU-PF regime, and so that's why I think there was a level of caution. But at the same time, I think people were encouraged that at least South Africa was taking a proactive role, and it was an opportunity for many stakeholders to engage with that South African envoy. Of course, the envoy reached out to a number of different stakeholders, opposition parties, churches, etc., and all of those meetings had to be cancelled after essentially, as you said, they were rebuffed. That seems to be a huge slight to Cyril Ramaphosa, to the South African government, and the war of words that we have seen exchanged between the ANC and ZANU-PF has been quite remarkable in a way, and really does seem to be potentially a major switching up or shaking up of the kind of geopolitical relations in Southern Africa. Of course, ZANU-PF have been able to retain power illegitimately for many decades now, largely as a result of having the backing of former liberation movements throughout Southern Africa, who have rubber-stamped unfair, unfree elections, despite there being massive irregularities, massive violence. And so if that dynamic begins to change, and actually the ANC starts to recognize, and the South African government starts to recognize that having a brutal authoritarian regime north of its border is actually starting to have a huge impact on South Africa as well. And that if South Africa plays a helpful role in resolving the Zimbabwe crisis, then South Africa stands to benefit from that as well. That could change things up for the region, and it could be to the huge benefit of ordinary Zimbabweans. But we have no illusions that the real work will need to be done on the ground here in Zimbabwe. But hopefully South Africa can play a helpful rather than an unhelpful role as we get to that place.
Well, Doug, as you rightfully mentioned, the well-being of Zimbabwe, of course, impacts the entire SADC region, the entire African continent at large. But I also just want to hone in on the latest with regards to Hopewell and Jacob's bail application that, of course, was heard on Thursday. I mean, ultimately, they were seeking the right to consult with their lawyers in private, with you in private. Walk us through what transpired, where to from here with the cases.
Yeah, so there were two applications this week, just to clarify. One was we brought in an urgent chamber application to the High Court around this issue, the fact that they were being denied consulting with their lawyers in private. They were being denied food being brought in from outside of the prison. They were being denied wearing PPE, COVID protective clothing in the prison. And so there was that application, which was actually successful yesterday. We managed to obtain an order. I mean, those sorts of basic rights are written clearly in our Constitution. Should never have been denied. It really in a sense was an absurd open and shut case. So we are thankful that has been successful. It remains to be seen whether the prisons will actually comply with that order, because it's not unheard of for government authorities to completely ignore court orders in Zimbabwe. But that we will be pushing from today. On the bail application side, this is now a new bail application based on changed circumstances. And that is the one that has really been stalled. And it really is quite an insight and illustration into the brokenness of the whole system. The state has opposed our lead counsel, Beatrice Mtetwa, representing Hopewell Chin'ono, on the absurd basis that a Facebook page about a documentary that was made about her some years ago had posted something about the case, and they're seeking to have her barred on the basis of this Facebook page from representing Hopewell. So most of the hearings last week or this week have been held up with arguing about who will be allowed to argue the bail application. That ruling has been set down for next week Tuesday, at which point, once that is determined, the actual bail application will be able to be heard.
All right, Doug Coltart, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Again, thank you very much for joining us here on Weekend Dawn. Lawyer and activist Doug Coltart, just giving us the latest about the developments in Zimbabwe, of course, related to the Jacob Ngaravume as well as Hopewell Chin'ono case that they had another failed bail application hearing on Thursday, and also the latest with regards to the SA envoy that had been rebuffed by President Emmerson Mnangagwa.